How do you think I knew where you were going? How did I know about your precious EMP devices?
Incoming!
My client gave me your comm channel! That's right. I've been gathering combat data for Operation Watchdog. You have been most useful in assisting me.
Live grenade!
Of course. My client wants this information. They will have to pay for it, and neither you or them can stop me.
This might be easier than I thought. Maybe I've overestimated
in my body. I won't have long. Fire grenade!
Incoming!
Grenade!
Watch out!
Nicholai is not a priority. Disengage and proceed to the power plant immediately. We need to deactivate that power grid.
So, kinda like yesterday's video, we get to fight yet another famous character from the Resident Evil 2 and 3 incidents, I guess you could call them. Do you remember that guy Nicholai from Resident Evil 3? I'm kinda surprised they actually put him in the game, because I thought this game was gonna be curbing mostly off of Resident Evil 2, and it does. So, Resi 3 being in it seems kinda weird. I mean, it's definitely possible, considering the time frame that they were working with back in the 90s, but it seems kinda odd if you're gonna be nostalgia kicking both games, especially since you're being set in the prequel time of Resident Evil 2. And yeah, I know technically it was set at the same time as Resident Evil 3, but Resident Evil 3 definitely had that after-the-fact vibe, considering what actually happened in that game. And mostly I'm saying all this unconnected bullshit because the fight with Nicholai, and the only time that we actually get to fight him, which is pretty depressing considering, is right now, where we do the usual thing that you do with a sniper character. And you gotta remember, Nicholai was the backstabber, one of the probably greatest twist villains that Capcom is ever going to get outside of Albert Wesker in the original game. Because, yes, it was obvious in Resident Evil 3 that this was going to happen, considering his whole deal, but They built it up a little bit, and they tried to support it, and they actually wrote a decent character for the guy. So it actually makes sense, and it's interesting to watch him in action, because he's definitely in control of everything, has a plan, and isn't just illogically villainous for no reason. Which a lot of games, unfortunately, seem to not understand, is that cartoonish villainy, outside of a few cases, isn't actually fun to see on screen. Mostly because there's no point to anything that cartoon villains do, so unless you got really strong gameplay to make up for that, it kinda tanks the whole game in of itself in some of the most extreme cases. But in Nicholai's case, he definitely was written in the mind of the person who made him at the time of Resident Evil 3, and isn't just a horrible knockoff that Slant Six just had to put in the game for that name recognition dollar. And when it all finally came down to stuff coming down, it really is unfortunate that they went with standard shootout number 72H, where you fight the sniper in a bunch of windows, and you have to watch where he's going, and avoid his shots, and take your shots when you can, and it's just the hide-and-seek template that we've seen 150 times. And again, this encapsulates a problem with the entire game, is that it is Resident Evil if you filtered that game through the most generic and motivationless person on the game development staff, who took a look at Gears of War and said, hey, we don't have any ideas, let's just do that. And all across video games, everywhere, you can see the potential and the great fun and challenge to be had when you fight snipers. Okay, if you need anything to be a prime example, Sniper Wolf in the original Metal Gear Solid is pretty much what you need to have a boss fight like this work, where it's following them around as they're following you around. It's an equal playing field with someone who actually has an intelligent AI instead of this hide-and-seek shootout bullshit that we've seen way too many times and has just become tired through repetition. It's a very tired idea, and seeing it again in 2014 at the tail end of the 7th generation is just sad. And it's just even more depressing when it was Nicholai who was the victim of this generalization. They had his writing up to snuff. Somehow Capcom managed to get that in the game. Had to get Nicholai's original characterization in that game 14 years later, probably more. And yet when it came down to the final gloves throwing moment, it became this. And just like William Birkin yesterday, we don't actually get to fight Nicholai. The whole thing gets cut off as soon as you do enough damage to him, because your leader, narrator, AI guy decides that he's not worth the trouble after you fought him for 2 minutes. He's just not worth the effort. Are you kidding me? This guy subvertively murders an entire hospital by himself. This was at the time frame when he was probably setting up all of his diabolical plans, and considering that, again, Resident Evil 3 only had 3 survivors of his original unit, there was nobody else working with him. He had the ingenuity and all this crap to set up all these traps that destroy entire buildings, and if he probably put his mind to it, he could easily destroy entire districts, and he gets reduced to this bullcrap. And the bullcrap doesn't even come full circle because we don't actually get to defeat him, and this incredible military intellect is just let loose on the streets because Umbrella thinks that they have better things to do. I thought they were here to kill survivors because they're the paramilitary guys that Umbrella sent in on top of their paramilitary guys in an effort to cover up the entire thing. And you're letting this guy who has all this intellect and all this superior survivability off the hook? Man, Umbrella really deserved their ultimate fate, didn't they? Anyway, the entire thing is just more parodies, more examples, more horrific adaptations of the original source material that shows that while it's always a shit thing to celebrate the closure of a studio, exactly why Slant Six didn't last past 6 games. They didn't make it out of the 7th generation, just like a lot of other people who try hard, but actually had no ideas to contribute. They closed down relatively quickly just because they were started up at the beginning of the 7th generation and closed almost at the end of it. And you can see what innovations that the 7th gen was known for, why that happened to them and so many other studios. And after seeing this and the video yesterday, I can definitely see how that happened. Like, they had no motivation other than copying the homework of other popular games. And even given the creative license to do whatever the hell they wanted with the adaptation potential of Resident Evil 2 and 3 in an alternate reality timeline, and this is all they can come up with, I think that just really says it all. And Nicholai's boss fight, his moment, isn't even worth the frickin' ammunition that you waste in trying to kill him. Because you never see what happens, you barely see him throughout the entire set piece, and then you just walk away like nothing ever happened. I am somewhat legitimately angry about this, and I'm honestly probably going to be in the other videos in this series up until the review, because it doesn't really get any better than this. I just have to thank God that there aren't a lot of set pieces with named characters and other bosses that they came up with. Why would they come up with other bosses? That would require actual work. I suppose adaptations was really all they had at the end of it.